They came to my door, demanding my house keys like they owned the place. Their uniforms, their fake authority, their smug confidence, it was all designed to make me comply without question. New policy, they claimed. Hand over your keys or face consequences. Their leader, Hargrove, smirked as he rattled off legal-sounding nonsense, fully expecting me to fold like every other homeowner they had bullied before. To them, I was just another easy mark, another resident too scared to challenge the compliance unit. But what they didn't know, I wasn't just a homeowner, I was a federal agent. And I had spent my career taking down con artists just like them. They thought they were in control. They thought they could intimidate me into submission. They had no idea they had just walked into their own trap, and by the time they realized the truth, it was already too late. But let's start from the beginning. The knock on my door. Moving into my new home was supposed to be a fresh start. A quiet neighborhood, a secure community, and a place where I could finally enjoy some peace. After years of chasing scammers, identity thieves, and fraudsters as an FBI agent specializing in cybercrime, I knew all too well how criminals operated. I'd spent my career tracking down people who preyed on others, using intimidation and deception to get what they wanted. But I never expected one of those scams to come knocking on my own door. It was a Sunday afternoon, and the day had been peaceful. I had just brewed a cup of coffee, its rich aroma filling the air, and was settling into my chair to go through some paperwork when it happened. A knock. Not a casual, neighborly knock. No, this was sharp, impatient. The kind of knock that said, "Open up, now." I immediately felt something was off. Years of experience had sharpened my instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming. I set down my coffee, walked to the door, and took a quick glance through the peephole. 3 men, standing in a tight formation, like they were expecting trouble. They wore black polo shirts, tactical pants, and utility belts, radios clipped to their shoulders. At first glance, they could pass for law enforcement, but something was wrong. There were no badges, no name patches, no department insignia, just a name tag on the burly one in front that read, D. Hargrove, Compliance Officer. That was my first red flag. Compliance Officer? Since when did HOAs have those? I unlocked the door but didn't open it all the way. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. The man in front, Hargrove, stepped forward with an air of authority, late 50s, graying hair, a permanent scowl. He had the kind of presence that made people comply before they questioned. "Afternoon, sir," he said in a clipped tone. "We're with the neighborhood HOA compliance unit. We need your keys." I frowned. "Excuse me?" "Your house keys," he repeated, slower this time, like I was slow to understand. New policy in effect. The HOA now requires access to all properties in the community for emergency inspections. We need a copy for the security office. I stared at him. The sheer audacity of that statement was almost impressive. A scam. An obvious, blatant scam. And yet, this guy wasn't nervous. He wasn't fumbling for words, wasn't second-guessing himself. That meant one of 2 things. He had done this before. It had worked before. I felt my jaw tighten. "That's not happening," I said, my voice flat. The younger men behind Hargrove stiffened. They weren't expecting pushback. That was my second red flag. Real law enforcement, or even real HOA officials, expect some resistance. They're trained for it. These guys? They looked like they weren't used to hearing no. Hargrove's expression darkened. "Sir, failure to comply will result in fines and potential legal action. If you refuse, we may be forced to escalate the matter." There it is. The intimidation tactic. A classic fraudster move. Pressure the target, make them think they're already in trouble, and force them to comply before they can question it. I crossed my arms. Is that a threat? The wiry guy on the left, nervous energy all over him, spoke up quickly, trying to de-escalate. Look, we're just doing our jobs. If you cooperate, it'll be easier for everyone. Easier for everyone? I nearly laughed. I gave him a long, measured look. You're not police officers. You have no legal authority to demand access to my property. Now, unless you have an actual warrant signed by a judge, I suggest you leave. The younger guy shifted uncomfortably. He knew this wasn't going how they planned. Hargrove, on the other hand, wasn't backing down. He wasn't used to being challenged. Sir, he said, his voice cold, this is your final warning. I smirked. Go ahead, note it. The three of them exchanged glances. There was a hesitation, just a second, but I caught it. They weren't used to people pushing back this hard. Hargrove let out a frustrated huff. Have it your way, he muttered, then turned on his heel. The two younger men hesitated for a split second before following. I watched them walk away. Every instinct in my body was screaming now. These weren't just power-hungry HOA enforcers. This was a scam, and I intended to find out exactly what they were up to, digging deeper. The moment they walked away, I knew this wasn't just a power-hungry HOA overreach. It was something far worse. These guys were too confident, too coordinated. They weren't fumbling their words or making empty threats. They spoke with authority, like they'd done this before, and gotten away with it. Well, not this time. I set my coffee down and pulled out my laptop. If these guys were operating under HOA rules, there had to be a paper trail. The search begins, first stop, the HOA's official website. Every legitimate HOA kept records of policies, meeting minutes, and rule changes. If they'd enacted a new policy requiring homeowners to hand over their keys, it had to be documented somewhere. I searched for compliance unit. Nothing. Emergency inspections. Nothing. Key access policy. Nothing. That was my first confirmation. These guys were lying. But I wasn't done. Next, I checked the county's public records. Any amendments to HOA regulations had to be officially filed. I searched for recent changes to my neighborhood's HOA agreements, expecting to see at least a mention of this so-called policy. Again, nothing. That was when my instincts really kicked in. Something about this didn't just feel shady. It felt calculated. The police report. If these guys were running a scam, I wasn't their first target. And if I wasn't their first target, someone else had probably filed a complaint. I widened my search. Local police reports. Bingo. 3 months ago, a homeowner in a nearby neighborhood had filed a fraud complaint. The details? 3 men, black tactical uniforms, 1 older guy in charge, demanding house keys under the guise of an HOA security policy. When the homeowner refused, his car was vandalized a week later. I clenched my jaw. So that's their game. They weren't just intimidating homeowners, they were punishing the ones who didn't comply. I scrolled down. The homeowner had suspected they were part of a burglary ring. The police had investigated but found no solid evidence. No arrests had been made. That explained the confidence Hargrove and his crew had. They thought they were untouchable. A face-to-face confrontation. The next morning, I drove straight to the HOA office. It was a small, beige building nestled between a community park and a local cafe. A row of perfectly manicured bushes lined the entrance, the kind that screamed, "We care about appearances more than people." Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old coffee and printer ink. HOA offices all had that same sterile, passive-aggressive atmosphere, like stepping into a place where people argued over lawn decorations and mailbox colors. At the front desk sat Susan Weller, the HOA president. She was mid-50s, sharp-eyed, dressed in business casual attire, the kind of woman who had probably spent years dealing with neighborhood disputes over fence heights. "Mr. Carter," she greeted, forcing a polite smile. "What can I do for you?" I pulled the fake policy document from my pocket and placed it on her desk. "Tell me about this." She adjusted her glasses and skimmed the page. Her face went pale. "This isn't real," she said immediately. I leaned forward. "I know, but 3 men showed up at my house yesterday demanding my keys. One of them called himself D. Hargrove." Her eyes snapped up, genuine shock flashing across her face. "We don't have a compliance unit," she said firmly. That was all I needed to hear. "Don't notify security." I sat back in my chair. "I need you to do something for me." She hesitated. "What?" "Don't notify the real HOA security." Her brow furrowed. "Why not?" "Because if these guys are bold enough to pull this stunt in broad daylight, they might have someone on the inside. If you announce an investigation, they'll disappear before we can find out who they really are." Susan sat in silence for a moment, considering my words. Then she nodded. "Be careful, Mr. Carter." I gave her a tight smile. "Oh, I will." Whoever these guys were, they were about to learn the hard way. They picked the wrong guy. These guys thought they could intimidate me. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't about to let them slip away and find new victims. No, I was going to catch them in the act. The very next day, I set my plan in motion. Laying the bait first, I installed extra hidden cameras around my property. Small, high-resolution, motion-activated. I placed them in strategic spots, under the eaves, near the doorbell, even inside my mailbox. If they came back, I'd have clear footage of their every move. But I needed more than just cameras. I needed to make sure they tried their scam again. That's when I called in a favor. A friend of mine, another FBI agent, posed as a new homeowner. He moved in just a few streets away, kept the lights on, left some unpacked boxes visible through the windows, made it obvious that he was fresh meat. And then we waited. Hook, line, and sinker. 48 hours later, they took the bait. Hargrove and his goons showed up at my friend's house, the same routine all over again. "Afternoon, sir," Hargrove greeted, that fake air of authority dripping from his voice. "We're with the HOA compliance unit. We need your keys." My friend played along perfectly. He stalled, asked questions, acted confused. He made them talk, and we recorded every second of it. They even pulled out another phony document, one just like the one they showed me. After about 10 minutes, my friend hesitated, then said, "I think I'll call my lawyer first." That was their cue to back off. Just like before, they tried to intimidate him with fines and escalation. And just like before, they left empty-handed. But this time, they didn't realize. They'd just given us everything we needed. The final move. That night, we reviewed the footage. Crystal clear evidence. The fake uniforms, the phony documents, the intimidation tactics. It was textbook fraud. I made one call to local law enforcement. "Next time these guys show up, be ready," I told them. And sure enough, they came back to my house. I opened the door to find Hargrove standing there, smug as ever. "Mr. Carter," he announced, "we need your keys." I folded my arms. "Sure, right after you show me your official badge numbers." The younger guys hesitated, glancing at each other. "I don't think that's necessary," Hargrove muttered, his confidence cracking. That's when I heard it, the sound of tires on pavement. A police SUV pulled up to the curb. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, their hands resting near their holsters. "Are you gentlemen licensed HOA enforcement officers?" one of the cops asked, eyes locked on Hargrove. He froze. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. I stepped forward, arms crossed. "Not according to our investigation." Hargrove tried to backpedal, but it was too late. I pulled out my badge. FBI, you just messed with the wrong homeowner. Justice served. Hargrove barely had time to react before the first pair of handcuffs clicked shut. Turn around. Hands behind your back, one of the officers ordered. The confidence drained from Hargrove's face in an instant. His mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but he must have realized there was no way out. Wait! This is a mistake! He sputtered, his voice a little too desperate now. The two younger guys weren't much better. One of them raised his hands before the officers even reached him, muttering a weak, I didn't know, man. I swear. Yeah, right. The truth comes out. Turns out, these guys weren't just some overzealous HOA enforcers. They were part of a full-scale property scam ring. Their MO was simple but effective. Step 1, pose as HOA officials. Step 2, demand access under the pretense of security inspections. Step 3, scope out valuables, make copies of keys, and return later for burglaries. They'd been running this for months. Some homeowners had given in to their intimidation without question. Others had refused and found their cars keyed, their windows smashed, even their homes broken into. But they hadn't expected to target someone who knew the law better than they did. Overwhelming evidence. The case went to trial fast. The evidence was damning. Fake documents, forged policies, official-looking papers designed to fool homeowners into compliance. Surveillance footage, crystal-clear recordings of their scam in action. Testimonies from multiple victims, homeowners who had been threatened, harassed, and in some cases, robbed. Hargrove sat stone-faced as the charges were read out. The judge wasn't impressed by his half-hearted defense. 5 years, fraud and conspiracy. His two accomplices took plea deals, testifying against him in exchange for reduced sentences. Justice for the community. After the trial, the real HOA reached out to me personally. They were shocked and embarrassed that someone had been impersonating their authority to run a scam. New security measures were implemented, and the entire community became more vigilant. A few days later, one of my neighbors, an older gentleman who had nearly fallen for the scam, stopped me outside my house. "How'd you figure them out so fast?" he asked, shaking his head in disbelief. I just shrugged. Scammers always think they're smarter than everyone else. I smiled. They just picked the wrong guy to fool. Final thought. It's easy to fall for intimidation tactics, especially when someone pretends to have authority. But if something feels off, trust your instincts. Because sometimes the best way to beat a scam is to be smarter than the scammer.